What's up, Kansas City? I'm your host, Glenn Bryan Frizzell. Today we are taping in the historic Lincoln Building, new home of Cascade Media, right here in the 18th Vine Street area, Kansas City, Missouri. Today's special guest is a community advocate who grew up with Mr. Gilbert Dowdy, who is currently serving a life sentence in Greenville, Illinois Federal Correction Institution. He believes that Mr. Dowdy's case should be revisited. Without further ado, let's welcome Mr. Willie Miller to the show. Mr. Miller, can you tell us exactly who is Mr. Gilbert Dowdy?
Gilbert Dowdy was a Kansas City native who was here most of his life. I know him from being a childhood friend in the neighborhood. Gilbert, as you said, Gilbert was an individual who, I know him as a fire captain, but the government alleged that he was an alleged drug kingpin with 125 soldiers. I say that with a smile on my face because they say he had 125 soldiers, but there were only 10 people indicted. Mm-hmm. So what happened to the other 115? Mm-hmm. So I believe that Dowdy's sentence was a harsh sentence and one that needs to be reviewed.
This was taken from the Reading Eagle, February 25th, 1990, which is exactly, 24 days from today. I meant to open with this, but we'll go ahead and read it now. Fireman charged in crack cocaine ring. A Kansas City Fire Department captain has a moonlighting job running a $50 million per year crack cocaine operation, sometimes through city fire stations, federal prosecutor said Saturday. Fire Captain Gilbert Dowdy, 41, is being held without bond on 10 federal charges, including conspiracy to distribute cocaine and crack, laundering money, using a gun for drug trafficking, and using a gun to assault an officer and resisting arrest. Dowdy is alleged to have overseen a parliamentary operation of about 125 soldiers, a number of lieutenants, and 4 generals who traveled to Miami, Los Angeles, Detroit to supply drug users in Kansas City, Wichita, and Junction City, Kansas. Is this a Gilbert Dowdy you knew?
Well, I'm not here to dispute the guilt or the innocence of Gilbert Dowdy because the jury's already made that determination. But what I am here for is to shed light on the fact that there's a stench, there's an odor of disparate treatment in the sentencing guidelines under which Dowdy was sentenced and the guidelines that we have today. Had Gilbert Dowdy been sentenced under the current guidelines, he'd be out. Of the 10 defendants that were convicted, Dowdy's the only one that's still incarcerated. There were 27.
You sent me 4 points, and I believe this goes to the first point why you believe his sentence should be commuted. Point 1 is specific, Mr. Miller, to the 10 convicted defendants in the Dowdy case. Gilbert, as you say, is the only defendant still incarcerated. Stephen Baker and Robert Turner were found guilty as charged. I couldn't find any information about them. What happened to his associates Baker and Turner?
The one common denominator on all of those who have been released is that they all found something to snitch on.
Mm-hmm. Even after they were locked up.
I mean, that's how you get out under a federal sentence. It's like, what can you give me? But like I said, it's the guidelines that really raises my eyebrow. The guidelines under which Gilbert was sentenced was a point system. In other words, a judge could enhance your sentence, give you additional time for charges that you may have been acquitted on or you may have never been charged. Mm-hmm. That's what happened to Gilbert Dowdy. Gilbert Dowdy's sentence was enhanced for charges that he was never charged with and was never convicted on.
And that goes to point 2. Before we go there, I wanted to ask you about his brother Samuel Dowdy, who was he was the only defendant who was acquitted at the time. He was defended by Sly James, who was then a successful attorney. Where is Samuel Dowdy today?
Sam has his own construction company. There are documents out there where the government depicted a organizational chart of how the Dowdy organization was set up. Nowhere in that organizational chart was was Sam Dowdy, but yet he was charged as a defendant.
That's the stint you talk about.
Right. Well, no, that's just the tip of the iceberg, man. This thing runs deep. There's Sam Dowdy. What really got him off was one of the government's witnesses testified that she happened to notice that Sam Dowdy put a kilo of cocaine in his shoe.
Not too smart.
So, neither are some of the charges. Dowdy was charged with a 27-count indictment, and only 4 he was found guilty on 4.
This is Gilbert Dowdy.
Yes. Yet his sentence was enhanced to a life sentence based on the fact that they claimed he was the head of a drug organization, which he was never charged with. They claimed that he had a firearm in the commission of a drug transaction, but the jury found him innocent. They acquitted him on that charge.
And this sentence, as you say, goes to your point number 2. It came with 2 enhancements: the legal firearm enhancement, Mr. Miller, and the money conversion innovation. And of course, in documents that Mr. Gilbert has filed, he claims that he did not possess a gun while trafficking drugs, and the district court unlawfully converted his money to equivalent drug amounts when determining the length of his sentence without hearing evidence that his money came from drug sales. Point 2, Gilbert's sentence was unjustly enhanced to a life sentence on 2 charges upon which he was acquitted by a jury. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Well, most people don't realize it, but the government, if the government says that if you are convicted on a prior conviction, that a judge has a right to enhance your sentence, despite the fact that you may have been acquitted by a jury or the fact that you've never been charged with a violation of law. The Supreme Court issued an opinion on, and I think the case was United States versus Booker, where the government stated that you cannot sentence a man to imprison an individual unless he's had a trial. But what they didn't retroactive that law back far enough to impact those inmates who had been sentenced under those old 91 guidelines, which is what Gilbert was sentenced under. So even today, the term prior conviction is really a definition that has not been defined by the Supreme Court. For example, does a prior conviction mean that I can enhance your sentence because, say, maybe you were convicted 6 months ago, a year ago, or 10 years ago of, say, auto theft? Or does a prior conviction mean that in order or does a prior conviction mean that a defendant must be tried and convicted by a jury for the same charges that a judge can enhance your sentence? Are you following what I'm saying? Because it is kind of murky. You see, in one breath they're saying, yeah, you can enhance his sentence, but it has to be a prior conviction. So it's the definition of what that prior conviction is. Now with Dowdy, they're saying that his sentence was enhanced because there was a firearm involved in the commission of a drug transaction. But the jury acquitted him on that charge. But he still got time. Those additional 2 points that they gave Dowdy pushed him to a life sentence. So the government does a very good job of mischaracterizing issues. Like now, I think the hot thing now is about crack cocaine versus powder cocaine. But in reality, there is another disparate issue that goes on with these guidelines, and that disparate issue involves the point system. For example, if you and I were convicted of the same crime, the same criminal activity, and if my crimes occurred during the 91 guidelines and yours occurred under today's standards, they would enhance your sentence with a mandatory sentence, either 5 or 10 years. Whereas me, I could be sentenced under a point system, and those additional points could actually push me to a life sentence. Mm-hmm. That's what happened to Dowdy. So, it's not just about the powder cocaine. Mm-hmm. It's about the disparity in the point system that a lot of the inmates were sentenced under the old guidelines versus the guidelines that we have today.
Let's talk a little bit about the next point. Gilbert was sentenced under the 1991 sentencing guidelines. Current sentencing guidelines utilize a mandatory minimum sentencing guideline. You say there's a disparity. I've explained the point reference to us. My question to you is, can we legally go back and retroactively change the 1991 sentencing guidelines?
It's going to take a legislative act to do that. There are things, the disparity in these guidelines has been something that's been quietly avoided. People don't really want to talk about helping someone who's been convicted of a crime, especially a drug dealer. But there's nothing that we can do as individuals. This is going to take a legislative act to go back and rectify that disparate treatment that these inmates, and I imagine there are over 12,000 of them that have been sentenced under those old guidelines that are still in jail.
Let me give our viewers a little background about where those guidelines kind of came from. During the Reagan administration, the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986 implemented the initial disparity, and this is off of Wikipedia, reflecting Congress's view that crack cocaine was a more dangerous and harmful drug than cocaine. Obama issued a Fair Sentencing Act of 2010, not the act that Gilbert Dowdy was sentenced under, because Gilbert's sentence came in 1991, right, which is a Sentence Reform Act. This is under right. Obama administration now. The law reduced the disparity between the amount of crack cocaine and powder cocaine needed to trigger certain United States federal criminal penalties from 101 weight ration to 18 in 1 ration, and eliminated the 5-year mandatory minimum sentence for simple possession of crack cocaine. Let me ask you another question. We believe in having two-sided conversations here, right. So I kind of want to take on 2 points of yours, if you will, play devil's advocate.
Okay.
I have an opinion neither here nor there right now.
Okay.
Mr. Dowdy's sentencing under the 1991 sentencing guidelines, which utilized a point system for sentencing enhancements based on 2 charges upon which he had been acquitted by a jury. We mentioned that. Look, if Dowdy had been charged and sentenced today under the mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines, prosecutors probably would have found a new way to charge him and lock him up for life. Mr. Miller, look, he's a top man CEO accused of running a major drug operation out of a midtown fire station. Why should Kansas City care to revisit his case? And why should they care that some of his minions have been released?
Well, like you said, he was accused. I don't believe they ever found any hard evidence to substantiate the charges. But in spite of that, he was convicted by a jury, and I guess that's what stands. Gilbert Dowdy, he came along at a time where we talk about the crack cocaine and the powder cocaine, but we've got to really take a look at how that got into the inner cities. You see, people don't want to talk about it, but the government, I'd say evil forces of the government, wanted to fund the Nicaraguan Contras during the Nicaraguan War. The government turned them down. So what they did, they formulated a plan to bring cocaine into the inner cities. And then from the profits from those drug sales, they would fund the rebels in Nicaragua. So we got to think about how all that got into the inner cities. There's a guy called
Gilbert Dowdy didn't bring it in.
No, but I'm just trying to do a comparison, because you had drug dealers, drug kingpins, like they called him Freeway Ricky Ross, because he was bringing truckloads of cocaine down the freeways, and they would give him a pass. You had drug dealers like Noriega over in Panama, who was bringing trainloads of cocaine. He's out. Freeway Ricky Ross is out. They had a woman called the Queen of Cocaine, Zelda Marcos, who not only brought trainloads and truckloads of cocaine into the country, but word is she committed a whole lot of murders. Mm-hmm. She's out. Mm-hmm. So my question is, I think everybody deserves a second chance. Matter of fact, I believe everybody deserves a third chance. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what needs to be granted to Gilbert Dowdy. Give a man a second chance to come home to his family and his friends. Because the prisons, our prisons, supposedly aren't there to punish anyone. It's merely there to reform an individual.
Well, we have a lot of facts here. I want to ask you something. There are members of Congress, Mr. Miller, who don't even support the Fair Sentencing Act that President Obama passed in 2010. The legislation enables violent and this devastating crack cocaine epidemic of the past to become a clear and present danger. These senators say that reducing the penalties for crack cocaine could expose our neighborhoods to the same violence and addiction that caused Congress to act even in the first place. What are your comments regarding that statement?
Well, when they locked up who they locked up, it still didn't stop the flow of cocaine. You know, there's always somebody next in line. Mm-hmm. And then you think about it. You know, like I said, this is all about economics. You know, like we talked about earlier, and I said, you know, if you were to go out and print up some money, they throw you in jail and call it, say, oh, he's counterfeiting. But when the government prints some money that ain't backed by anything, they call that inflation, you see. So whether Gilbert Dowdy's out or whomever, the flow of cocaine is that's why they call it a war on drugs, you know. But I do believe at his age, I think Gilbert's now probably close to 65 or 66 years old. I don't think he would reoffend. Mm-hmm. You know, and like I said, I believe that everybody deserves a second and a third chance at life.
Fair enough. Mr. Miller, isn't there really a larger issue here? Mandatory minimums are unfair and lead to disparities in sentencings for minorities in comparison. But how can you compare someone like Gilbert Dowdy, who was really the accused mastermind of a major drug operation, to a Clarence Aaron, a 23-year-old college student whom President Obama recently pardoned, that received 3 life sentences in a drug conspiracy trial based on the testimony of informants?
Well, Gilbert Dowdy was sentenced under those same conditions. There were no drugs found. He was sentenced under the testimony of individuals who had also been charged with crimes and whose sentences were reduced as long as they testified. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, word is that Dowdy was on the way to trial, and they had picked up several inmates, and they were all in this one van. And he happened to ask this one individual, you know, what they got you here for? Oh, I'm on the way to testify in the Gilbert Dowdy trial. Mm-hmm. And he's saying, I'm Gilbert Dowdy. I don't know this guy. You know, I'm saying this to say that there are evil forces in our government. You know, and let me tell you, man, you don't have to be convicted of a crime. They can sentence you to time. Just on the preponderance of evidence. Mm-hmm. But our Constitution says that you must have a right to a trial, mm-hmm. and that it must be beyond the shadow of doubt. Mm-hmm. That's not the case. Mm-hmm. Because if you can convict a man, punish him without a conviction, based on the preponderance of evidence, or so they say, based on the overwhelming facts, then that's not beyond the shadow of doubt. Mm-hmm.
2 quick questions, Mr. Miller. What was Mr. Dowdy's what was his reputation like as a fire captain in Kansas City? Can you speak a little bit about that?
A lot of people told me Dowdy was fearless, that they were going to go into a building to fight a fire. That's who they'd want to be with. I know you've seen when they had the firemen went on strike. Mm-hmm. You had a lot of experienced firemen out there. They didn't go in the buildings. They sat out on the street and shot water up on the buildings. But it takes somebody who's courageous and fearless to go in a building, a burning building, put their life on the line, and that's what Gilbert was doing.
What do you think prison has done to Mr. Dowdy? Has it worked to reform him, guilty or not? Has it worked to harden him? Do you think he's bitter?
Well, I mean, you know, anytime you've been sentenced and you've been incarcerated for as long as he's been incarcerated, there has to be an impact on his life. But I believe that Gilbert has been a model prisoner. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, in '91, prior to the sentencing of Dowdy,
there were some people who tried to escape.
Yeah, matter of fact, they did. They were up in Utah. The word is that they were in Utah, and someone had come up there and did an old cowboy style with the rope around the prison bars and the horse pulling the bars down, and everybody escaped but Dowdy. Dowdy stayed there. He didn't leave. And you know what happened? When they caught him, they said, "If you tell us who broke you out, we'll reduce your sentence." And that's what they did. So here they are. You got people who have supposedly been convicted of as many violations of law as Dowdy in relation to cocaine, and who have broken out of prison, mm-hmm. but they're out and he's still in. Mm-hmm. I think the reason why Dowdy's still in is because he made a poor choice for a lawyer. Mm-hmm. Gilbert got a lawyer who was not a litigator, mm-hmm. And so he paid the price for that.
She certainly has write-ups in the news. If you read about the Gilbert Dowdy case, you'll hear accounts of his lawyer. You told me over the phone, Mr. Miller, I'm not saying he's not guilty. I believe he's worthy of a second chance. I believe in second and third chances, as you told our viewers here today. Two last questions. What are you doing to give Mr. Dowdy that second chance?
Well, what I'm doing now is enlighten as many people. I'm also, I don't really want to tell you my strategy, but there's some things that I'm doing with hopes that someone will realize that there's some injustice that's going on, because Gilbert has served his time. He served all of the time that the jury, based on the charges that the jury convicted him on. These additional years that he's in prison on are due to the enhancement. Those enhancements were a clear violation of the Sixth Amendment. And so based on that alone, if they just went back and leveled the playing field, Gilbert would be out. Gilbert should be out.
And what can What's Up Kansas City viewers do to help your movement?
There's a smart sentencing law that's I think it's either in the House right now or the Senate. People should encourage, and I'm not saying that I'm for releasing violent inmates. I'm just talking about inmates who aren't violent, that have been model prisoners. Give them a second chance at life. And so we can't do anything. It has to be legislation that's passed. And I think Obama realizes that because, matter of fact, I got an article here. This is from a judge.
Please, let's
okay,
share.
This is from a judge.
And Judge Stevens is the one who originally
this judge's name
Joseph
is
Stevens sentenced Gilbert
Poshner. And he writes, "The prisoners I lose sleep over." Mm-hmm. He was a federal judge. He said, I can't sleep at night because I think about those prisoners that I sent to jail under those sentencing guidelines, and I can't sleep. And he agrees that the right thing to do is to pass this Smart Sentencing Act. And those prisoners who are in there, I'm talking about nonviolent inmates who are in jail today, give them a second chance at life. Because we let murderers out and killers out. Come on, man.
This article's from the Wall Street Journal. Do you have any final words, Mr. Miller?
The only thing I'd like to say is that, we can all turn a blind eye to what I'm saying, but believe me, it could happen to you. You can never say you can go to jail, because let me tell you, I'm not saying every cop out there is honest, but it wouldn't take much for them to stop you at night and drop a couple of bags of cocaine in your car and you own it. We need to wake up.
Wake up. With that, What's Up Kansas City? We'd like to thank Mr. Miller. Please keep us up to date as far as the progress with this. Until the great mass of the people shall be filled with the sense of responsibility for each other's welfare, social justice can never be attained. That's a quote by Mr. Helen Keller. Check out more video online at www.whatsupkansascity.net. Till next time, take care.
What's up, Kansas City? We are Cascade Media Group.
CMG is calling all small businesses, organizations, solicitors of products or services that would like to reach their KC Metro viewers and would like our help.
We produce commercials, promote, advertise, and film events. Not to mention display company banners, including a link to your website on either of our sites.
That's whatsupkansascity.net, the premier outlet for Kansas City.
Or CascadeSports.tv, home of the student athletes.
If you're interested, contact CMG at 816-389-0259.
Or email us at mgcascademediagroup@hotmail.com.
And remember,
It pays to advertise.